Thank you, Mr. Secretary, Chairman, for the opportunity to describe how our diplomatic efforts are working in lockstep with the military campaign to destroy ISIS and ensure it cannot return. As the Secretary and Chairman just mentioned, ISIS has lost 55,000 square kilometers of territory to coalition-backed forces, and ISIS has retaken none of that ground. The reason for that record are close cooperation between the military and civilian departments and agencies, between a global coalition of 68 members, all supporting partners with influence, courage, and capacity on the ground. As the Secretary mentioned, I just returned from the region this morning, including trips outside Mosul and Raqqa, and met some of the brave Syrians and Iraqis who only months ago were living under the terror of ISIS. And to date, coalition-enabled operations have freed more than 4 million people from areas that had been controlled by ISIS. This is a remarkable record, and we're now working to accelerate these effects with pressure on ISIS's capital of Raqqa and their dwindling areas still under ISIS control in Iraq and Syria. During my recent trip, I again witnessed how our diplomats are fully integrated with our military colleagues around a whole-of-government effort to fulfill President Trump's charge to destroy ISIS and ensure it can never return. As many of you have seen, I wish all the American people could see the extraordinary work that our men and women in uniform are doing, together with our courageous diplomats on the ground in these areas. When Secretary Tillerson hosted all 68 members of our coalition in March, it was significant that he was joined throughout parts of the day by Secretary Mattis, by Secretary Mnuchin, Director Pompeo, Director Coates, and other representatives from across our interagency. This demonstrated the coalition and to the world our united whole-of-government approach as directed by the President. Such cooperation is enabling an anaconda-like approach to suffocate ISIS of its territory, finances, propaganda, and ability to move foreign fighters. So I'll give you some examples. Before a partner force launches a military operation, we do extensive diplomatic and political work at the local levels to try to set conditions for stability after ISIS. Mosul was a central example of this, where we've seen really unprecedented cooperation between the Kurdish Peshmerga forces and Iraqi security forces, working together, fighting together, and taking casualties together. This cooperation has enabled closer political coordination between local, regional, and national governments to help return people to their homes after the battles are won through an innovative post-conflict approach based on empowering people at the local level to restore life to their communities. And we call this stabilization, and it's one of the primary focuses of our global coalition, led particularly by Germany, Italy, France, UAE, Norway, UK, other key contributors. Stabilization is not nation building. We're not attempting to dictate political outcomes, nor is it long-term reconstruction, where projects are chosen by outsiders, often with no connection to the local community, costing and often wasting billions of dollars. Instead, stabilization is a low-cost, sustainable, citizen-driven effort to identify the key projects that are essential to returning people to their homes, such as water pumps, electricity nodes, grain silos, and local security structures, local police. The initial focus on demining key facilities, because ISIS plants explosives in all of these facilities to ensure people can't return, has been a critical focus of our coalition. In Iraq alone, Iraqis trained by our coalition supporting demining have now cleared 34 tons of explosive material. Following demining, experts come in, local workers from the local area, Syrians and Iraqis, to restore key facilities and enable life to return. This is not glamorous work, but it's working. In Iraq, 1.7 million Iraqis are now back in their homes, no longer displaced, no longer refugees or migrants seeking to flee. That record is historically unprecedented in a conflict of this nature, and we give tremendous credit to the government of Iraq and local leaders who have worked cooperatively to stabilize local areas and return local populations. In Mosul, as the chairman just mentioned, the battle's not over. It is approaching its final stages thanks to the historic and really heroic sacrifice of the Iraqi security forces, Kurdish Peshmerga, supported by our coalition. ISIS is now resorting to barbaric tactics, using civilians as shields to hold on to the territory that they still hold. In areas of the city that have been cleared, however, life is starting to return, thanks in no small measure to the stabilization projects, more than 200 now, that have been supported by our coalition, by the United Nations and the Iraqi government. I visited one of these projects last week, a water treatment plant that had been destroyed by ISIS, and since it has been demined, restored by local workers, and then with very limited coalition support, is now pumping fresh water to 100,000 homes. To date in Mosul, 116,000 displaced civilians have returned, 250,000 boys and girls are back in school, and we're working to ensure that these trend lines continue. Raqqa will use the same model. I just visited a town north of Raqqa where local leaders are organizing for the day after ISIS. And working with local Syrians, as we did before the Mosul operation, we've identified hundreds of critical sites and targets for stabilization projects. After ISIS, we'll work to support demining of those facilities and then their rapid restoration, relying on local workers who know the area and how things get done. The Raqqa campaign will take time, but our core principle holds. After the battle, local people, Raqqawis from the area, should be in charge of their city and enabled to help life return to the streets and invite people to return. A few days ago, I met an Arab leader from the town of Topka, a stronghold of ISIS for over 3 years, just west of Raqqa. He described to us the thousands of foreign fighters from as far away as Trinidad and Tobago who terrorize his community, enslaving women, brainwashing children, and committing public executions. He also said he believes that most of these foreign fighters are now dead, and he's working to organize demining initiatives and ensure the streets are safe for people to return and enable the people of Topka, the local people of Topka, to restore their community. So Raqqa will be no different. Syria, of course, is far more difficult than Iraq. We don't have a government to work with, and we will never work with the Assad regime. We'll require much more from our coalition partners and from the international community. When Secretary Tillerson called on the coalition to support stabilization initiatives back in March, he received an impressive $2.6 billion, much of which is now being spent. But more will be required from our coalition, and we'll look for our partners to maintain at least 3/4 of stabilization support for every U.S. dollar. The battle for Raqqa is about making the world safer for ISIS, and we'll ask much of our coalition partners as they continue to support this effort. And President Trump will have the opportunity on May 25th to discuss these initiatives with our NATO partners, our NATO allies, all of whom are members of our coalition. Very briefly, other non-military elements of our coalition include counter-finance, counter-foreign fighters, counter-messaging. So no matter where you are in the world, if you join ISIS or recruit for ISIS or distribute propaganda for ISIS, the global net is closing in. The newest member of our coalition, for example, is Interpol. More than 60 countries are now providing data to Interpol to build a global database of known foreign fighters who've worked with ISIS. That database had only 40 people a few years ago. Now it has 14,000 and continues to grow. So in sum, we're working as a united team at President Trump's direction to destroy ISIS and protect our homeland. And the record is encouraging. Nearly 60,000 square kilometers liberated, none of it retaken from ISIS. All of it is held. 4.1 million people freed. 1.7 million Iraqis now returned to their homes. Propaganda output down significantly, its lowest levels to date. Finances down to the lowest levels to date. Foreign fighters unable to travel to Syria. And those who are already in Syria are more likely than ever to die there. This enemy remains adaptive, and the threat will not end with the battles of Mosul and Raqqa, but the end of the phony caliphate is coming into sight, and without telegraphing anything that is to come, the pressure has only started. And we'll work together as a united team, whole of government, to make sure we do everything we can to defeat ISIS on the battlefield, but also in the financial realm, propaganda realm, and make sure they can never return to areas we retake. Thank you.